everybody's body is different and everybody's disease is different. And everybody's disease mapped on the body is also different. So what is right for me may not be right for you. And in fact, when people come to me, I don't necessarily recommend the multitude of things that I do because it may not work for them. But we can all make incremental changes to better ourselves and try to figure out what it is that we can do. And it doesn't all have to be at one time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Peak Health with Dr. Gupta. This show is for those who want to optimize their health, maximize their genetic potential, and have some fun along the way. All of us have had a friend or loved one affected by cancer. In fact, approximately 40% of individuals in the US will be diagnosed with cancer at some point in their lives. That's a huge number. Conventional medicine focuses a lot on screening methods for prevention and surgery, chemo, radiation, etc. for treatment. But what is not discussed enough is that you have the power to make change, and a lot of control is in your hands in terms of prevention and treatment. Many people feel hopeless, but this certainly should not be the case. And that is the topic of today's webcast, feeling empowered with the prevention or treatment of cancer. In this light, I'm extremely excited about our guest and a dear friend of mine, Kimberly Parekh. Kimberly was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 38 in February of 2015 and has since been an active cancer advocate. Her breast cancer interest lies in evidence-based, holistic, and complementary approaches for treatment and well-being. In that regard, Kimberly is the founder of a community support group for young persons with metastatic breast cancer in the DC region hosted by the Smith Center. She's also a board member of the Smith Center, which promotes integrative strategies for cancer survivors. Through this position, she supports cancer advocacy for the White House's Cancer Moonshot 2.0 initiative. Kimberly works in the Komen Foundation in organizing their annual DC Regional Metastatic Breast Cancer Conference. Kimberly also works as a senior education advisor for the World Bank and UN and is based out of Washington, DC. She continues to enjoy traveling internationally for both work and pleasure and spends much of her time in various holistic practices such as yoga and a plant-based diet. Welcome, Kim.
Thanks. Nice to be here, Ravi.
Yes, really happy to have you. And why don't we just start off with you telling us, we'll just get into it. Just tell us a little about your early life and what your lifestyle was like and your habits were like kind of growing up, and then how you came to know of this diagnosis.
Okay, so I was born and raised in the States, and that's how I know Dr. Gupta, Ravi. We were classmates at University of Virginia. And I, from an early age, had an interest in helping others. And I chose a career in international development, which led me all over the world. In my 20s, I started and ran schools for very marginalized and underserved children, and then moved back at the age of 30 to start a doctoral program and eventually made my way back to the DC area. So my professional life really works a lot in international development, education, child protection, and kind of has equity embedded within that. And it's been a very big part of my life. But I've also, for many reasons, I've gravitated towards well-being. You know, it wasn't always like that, but in my 20s started to come into different things that sort of made me feel good and made me feel whole, and really started to pick many things up along the way. So I'm a lifelong vegetarian, started practicing yoga in my early 30s. I've been practicing for 15 years now. Somewhere along the way, I became a vegan. And so I would always sort of look at ways of health and, try to, it just made me feel good. Honestly, it was a way of, keeping my energy consistent, feeling good about myself. And so when I was diagnosed at the age of 38 with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer, it came as a big surprise to me and all those around me. I can't even tell you how many people, almost every person in my life said, but you're the healthiest person I know, because it was always like that. My snacks were never cupcakes. They were always carrots. And so it was a bit of a shock.
I remember that moment when you told me. I mean, I remember it like it was yesterday because it was so shocking. I didn't expect this at all. And certainly there's a period of time where, as everybody feels hopeless in this kind of situation. but then you gained this hopefulness later. So how did that happen? How did that transition happen for you?
Oh, I don't know if I would say I felt helpless, but I had a lot of anxiety. So I was 38 years old. And at the time, we had heard about, in fact, a very close friend of mine, one of my best friends from university, had early stage breast cancer. And that we were starting to hear of, unfortunately, some women, and now we know men in their 30s with breast cancer. But advanced breast cancer, stage 4, is a different thing. So, as you know, all cancer is treatable, but only stage 0, 1, 2, and 3 is curable. And only 5% of those under the age of 40 are diagnosed with stage 4. So I felt so alone. I felt like I was given this very serious, and at the time, a terminal diagnosis. The survival rate for a person with my demographic and pathology at that time was 22%. And as you know, survival rate is not for the rest of your life. It's given in a span of 5 years. So I had a 1 in 5 chance that I would make it 5 years. It was hard. It was really hard. And I felt anxious. I felt very anxious. So I wouldn't say hopeless, but it felt very uncertain for me, for sure. And I took the year off. At the time, the year prior, I had quit my job with the federal government to finish my doctoral dissertation. So I was in the midst of writing and I put it aside. And I actually initially got very sick. So this doesn't happen to most people, although actually many people have significant side effects from the treatment. So I've never done surgery and I've never done chemo, but they did radiation to my spine. And that gave me a severe side effect of esophagitis. So a 5-centimeter tract in my esophagus got burned and it was raw and bleeding. And I was hospitalized and down to 90 pounds. And, they were fighting about whether or not to put a PEG feeding tube, so a direct feeding tube into my stomach. And my oncologist team ended up pushing back on that, which I'm thankful for. And I slowly had to build strength, come back to myself. And so in the beginning, it was a lot of just that physical type of healing and getting better. And once I started to get stronger, I wanted to sort of, I don't know, for me, maybe it was a sense of control, or maybe it was a sense of like doing something for myself or just wanting to get better. But I started to study a number of different complementary strategies that I could do in addition to the medicine that I was taking.
So as just
made recommendations and said, this is the medicine for you.
Right.
And then in addition, I started to take that path. So I spent an entire, almost a year. I started to read prolifically. I visited an integrative oncologist who I recommend to everybody that comes into this similar.
Let me pause for 1 second, Kim. So first of all, thank you so much for sharing that, because I know that's a difficult topic for anyone to share. It's very personal. Sincerely appreciate that. But it also, by you sharing that, it gives people tremendous hope, because what you just shared with me this information before we started recording, and maybe you could just share it with our listeners here. What did the oncologist just tell you recently?
Yeah. So, it's been 7 years. That was 7 years ago.
Right.
And it's been a long journey, and I continue to take the hormone and target therapy, but in addition to doing all of these complementary strategies, which I will outline in a bit, now 7 years later, I'm stable. So I have what they call no evidence of active disease in my spine, which was the source of my metastasis, as well as in my breast. When I was originally diagnosed, I had disease burden. So the cancer, the tumors covered 70% of my breasts, and now it's all gone. It's disappeared.
That's unbelievable.
It's amazing. And I'm not sure, what to credit for it. And I don't know. I don't know if it's quite, there's a lot of, I think that I really believe in the complementary and holistic things that I do, but, people have mixed opinions about it, but it helps the rest of my body for sure. And I actually think that it's helping to mitigate cancer progression and cancer tumor growth, which I'm sure you agree with as well. And so for me, I'm happy to do it all. So
Well, that's so amazing. I mean, I can't tell you how excited and happy I am for you hearing that. And I absolutely agree. There's other strategies that you can take so you can have control over this process. And the feeling of hopelessness or helplessness is something that I'm sure almost everyone feels when they get this diagnosis. But the great thing is there are things that you can do, and there are things that you just mentioned. You could take control of your body, your health, maybe your overall well-being, and let your body sort of manage and mitigate this disease, because there's tremendous healing capacity within all of us. We just have to tap into it. There's so many, and there's different modalities to do it. So that's what we're going to talk about during this webcast, is talking about that, your experience, and what you can share with us. I want to start by just defining functional medicine, which is the medicine that I practice. And it's a collaborative systems-based approach to medicine, as opposed to functioning independently like conventional practices. For example, you'll see the cardiologist or the oncologist or the GI doctor. So everybody, focuses on their system. They don't look at the body as a whole. So functional medicine is a type of medicine where you look at the body as a whole and you look at the root causes and see what's causing disease and try to mitigate and solve those problems. And just want to add that, to be clear, all cancer isn't equal, right? Somebody with breast cancer could have a vastly different cancer from one to another, even though they're both diagnosed with breast cancer. So, there's not a one treatment fits all approach for these people, but there's the functional medicine approach and, the integrative approach, same thing that you've been talking to me about, and same things we'll discuss in just a bit. They're the same, and they work just in general to help you feel better, to feel healthier, feel this vitality, and really engage the natural healing processes of your body. So we're going to focus on mindset, including stress and relationships, diet, nutrition. Number 2, sleep. Number 3, metabolism and detoxification. Number 4, and then exercise. Number 5. Now there's a lot of other areas, but these are the main areas which we'll focus. So we'll try to go one to the other just to get your input and recommendations for these things. And, we can always sort of mix and match around as we go, but because they all are intertwined in some way. So let's start with mindset. I think, keeping a positive outlook, because every time we meet, you're just so positive and full of energy. And I love that about you. How do you manage stress and keep that positive outlook?
No, thanks. Yeah, and before I get into the answering your question, I just wanted to respond to what you were saying about functional medicine. I completely agree with you. And I look at the body as a whole and take a very mind, body, soul approach. And so I think that everything in concert will kind of make us, sort of better and lead to sort of better well-being. And I also want to say, before I start getting into my own personal history and experience, and as Ravi sort of alluded to or directly said just now, everybody's body is different and everybody's disease is different. And everybody's disease mapped on the body is also different. So what is right for me may not be right for you. And in fact, when people come to me, I don't necessarily recommend the multitude of things that I do because it may not work for them. But we can all make incremental changes to better ourselves and try to figure out what it is that we can do. And it doesn't all have to be at one time. In my own personal experience, it happened one by one. I took this approach where I sort of learned about one thing that I knew about first really well. So for me, it was nutrition, right? And so then I focused on that, made some incremental changes. And once it became a habit, then I kind of gained interest and I focused on something else, and that's what I would recommend to anybody who wants to take this approach. And I would also say that in the beginning, when you're first diagnosed or when you're in acute treatment, it's okay to leave this to the side. I mean, your job is to really stabilize And when you stabilize and you have the room and the wherewithal, then you can start to engage in all these different things, and it will come natural, right?
Absolutely.
So that kind of segues into your question and the mindset. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I work in poverty. So I've always been a positive person. It's hard to work in poverty and be, otherwise you would be a depressed person. But I actually, when people say that to me, yes, I am optimistic and I sit on the positive side. But with this, I draw a lot from my faith and my background and the things that I tell people, that it's okay to have bad days and it's okay to feel that, just, feel all the feelings. And I think what I tell people is you don't necessarily have to be positive, because I think there can be a toxic positivity where we're not recognizing some things that are difficult or challenging for us, but you don't necessarily have to be negative either. You can stay in the middle and be neutral and take out the judgment and the expectations and see. I mean, my case is part of the continuum and it sits on one side of it for sure. I have had an exceptional response, but you could be that person too. You don't know that. You don't know if, yes, and it is a serious disease that has serious consequences and a serious serious prognosis, right? But I would just say, just rest in a neutral space and try not to make judgment. And so in order to create that mindset, what I do is to have opportunities for blank space. So a lot of people come to me and say, "Oh, Kimberly, but I don't meditate." That's okay. You don't have to meditate as such, but your mind is always spinning. And for me, trust me, when I was diagnosed, I was sleeping 4 hours a night. My mind was out of control spinning. But once I sort of created these opportunities for rest. So for me, my two major opportunities for rest are yoga. When I kind of come into the physical space, I don't allow my mind to think, not gently push away and really focus on the physicality or taking walks. There's a lot of mindfulness for me when I walk. I have stopped running because the metastasis is on my spine, but yeah, so that's what I sort of recommend is that. And for sure, I draw back from my faith and, the fact that things are temporary and it's not always going to be like this. Yeah. And it's through my whole 45 years and yours too. I mean, everybody's, sometimes it's a lot of joy and sometimes it is difficult. And sometimes it is perfectly possible to experience joy and suffering at the same time. That
Absolutely.
is beauty of life. So those are my little nuggets.
Yeah, no, that's great. And there's so much we could talk about for each of these topics, and you can literally go on for hours and hours, but we'll try to just chunk it down to the main things. And what you said is super important. Just some kind of mindfulness practice is very important in general. Meditation, going for walks, exercise is also yoga is super important. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. That's all important for just that general stress relief and calmness. And then I also think it's important to understand that when you are in a space of calmness, there is healing there. When you're agitated, you're stressed out, your cortisol levels are higher. Your adrenergic levels are higher. You're getting gut issues from that kind of thing. You're not sleeping well. You're eating improperly. Like there's a lot of consequences from being stressed out. So just being peaceful in and of itself is super helpful. So those are some of the basic things to do. And then also, I think very importantly, focus on gratitude, right? Like, because if you're in a space of gratitude, fear and anger sort of go away. And it's sometimes hard to be in that space, but if you condition yourself on a daily basis, and as you said, not be toxically positive, because you can certainly do that and try to ignore things, but like really focus on things that you have in life that, like your friends, your family, or, your dog, or, the house you live in, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
You focus on that, keep, just hone in on that gratitude, and that helps tremendously.
I
so powerful.
Totally agree with you. That gratitude piece is so critical, and doing sort of one kind thing for yourself every day, and like things like when I was in the hospital, I couldn't take down a cup of water. So when I drink a cup of water, I feel so grateful for that. It's like small little things, and so Yeah.
Exactly.
Believe in that.
So let's move on to diet. Given you just spoke about water, which is part of a important part of diet. So now you mentioned you're vegan. So, I mean, how did that play into this? What kind of, dietary practices do you have?
So that was before cancer.
Yeah.
Amazingly so. But what I did was I tried to be so kind of vegan-ish and gluten-free is what I tried to be. But I made some adjustments with cancer when I started to take a little bit of a lens for foods that we know are really powerful in the cancer journey. So, and that's really readily available online. So, for example, we know that cruciferous vegetables offer sort of powerful components to fighting cancer. We know that beta carotene, so all of these wonderful orange colored vegetables. We know that lycopenes, which we get through tomatoes or certain types of mushrooms or, leafy greens. And so really kind of honing in. And I was really steadfast in the beginning and literally would run through this mental kind of list of like making sure that I was getting this super balanced, diet. So that I was doing everything in my power. And I'm still like that. I've just with stability. And I think, eased up a little bit. But yes, I tried to take that approach. Where I am low glycemic, anti-inflammatory, eat things that cause less oxidative stress. So for example, blueberries are high in antioxidants, right? So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to mitigate the enabling factors that will exacerbate or worsen the cancer. So that's my entire approach towards that. So things that I know are not good for me, I just don't do it. Not that I have been like that for years, but I just don't do it anymore. So
what about fasting? Did you do any fasting or low calorie diet?
My thing within cancer, I've tended to, everybody is different, but at different points have struggled in maintaining weight. So there is a thing around calorie consumption and things like that. But I do like intermittent fasting, and I do, in fact, de facto intermittent fast. So probably 16 hours de facto, I end up doing that. I think a big thing, one of the things that I do is I juice. So I juice vegetables to really get a direct hit of nutrients into my body. And one of the things that we'll get into when we talk about detox is hydration. So elimination is really important. And part of that, people often don't drink enough water. So as you will probably tell us in a bit, it may be a good idea to go online. They're free hydration calculators, and that will assess your body weight and the altitude and the sunlight. And if you're pregnant and, and tell you how much water, and you'll be surprised. I mean, most of us are underhydrating, but that's so good because it's a part of detox. So these are sort of some of the things that I do.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And I'll just add a few things. You mentioned that inflammation is incredibly important because you want to eat an anti-inflammatory diet. And that literally is kind of the basis of what you're trying to do in mitigating the diagnosis or preventing cancer. Eating a whole, unprocessed foods diet is incredibly important. Vegetables, as you mentioned, lots of vegetables. Your plate should consist of vegetables, a protein source, and healthy fats. And if you don't understand an ingredient, then you probably shouldn't be eating it. Like, you buy a bag of chips with a laundry list of things that you have no clue what they are. You probably should not be eating that. Kind of a rule of thumb is 5 ingredients or less and ingredients that you know. But ideally, you don't even want 5. You just want 1 ingredient. Like, this is an avocado. This is this is spinach. So it's very simple. Also, there is some obesity related cancers as well. And the goal is to really eat a diet so that you are dropping your body fat and specifically your visceral fat, because that causes a lot of inflammation. So sort of like a rule of thumb is looking at your waist hip ratio. So for men, it should be less than 0.9, for women, less than 0.8. And if you're above that, you really want to try to eat such that your visceral fat decreases, that, therefore your inflammation will decrease, and you potentially will prevent cancers just by doing that in and of itself. Another thing to do is checking your fasting glucose and fasting insulin, 2-hour postprandial glucose and insulin. So those are some of the that's the theory behind diet. It's really, as you mentioned, anti-inflammatory, high in antioxidants, whole balanced diet, and really avoiding processed type food.
Completely. I completely agree with you. And if you can, trying to be seasonal, even there's so much correlation with food and nature. So like in the summertime, we eat berries because they give us a lot of fluid and liquid, and we need that. We need to hydrate because it's hot outside, right? And then as opposed to the winter and eating heartier fruits like apples and pears and things like that.
Yeah. Like a colorful plate is ultimately what's important. You want to eat all the colors of the rainbow, as many colors as you can. A lot of people don't eat enough purple type foods, like that's a color that people don't eat much of. And those foods like blueberries or, things like those types of things are super high in antioxidants and phytonutrients. Okay, let's go to detoxification, because you mentioned that. So you mentioned you hydrate for detoxification. Do you do anything else? What other practices do you have?
So there's a couple of things that I think for me have personally been important. So the hydration is one. Sweating is another one, because as Dr. Gupta will probably tell you about the skin and its utility in releasing. So the yoga that I practice is heated. So that allows us opportunity to sweat a lot. And then, of course, around elimination and gut health, which I'm sure you're going to talk about or get into. So I think with the kind of synchronicity of those three things, that's what I do around kind of toxicity, because I eat so clean and I do everything else is rather clean. So these are just kind of opportunities to, and it all works in concert with each other. So for example, like proper rest, like we'll talk about that. That's also needed so that you can repair and regrow, right? So these are the ways.
Yeah. So when people think about detoxification, some people don't understand it, but as you mentioned, literally it means just eliminating, right? So like, kind of your stool, your urine, your sweat. I mean, those are the three ways your body eliminates toxins that are in your system. So what you want to do is support these systems. So you mentioned, sweating and going into a sauna. Actually, there's a lot of data supporting sauna treatments because you are sweating. And eliminating toxins that way. You want to facilitate having regular bowel movements. And if you eat fibrous vegetables and a healthy whole foods diet, you will notice your bowel movements will become regular. Some people, will say, oh, I'm regular. I go 1 to 2 times a week. Every week I go 1 to 2 times. And that's not regular. Regular is 1 to 2 times a day. You also drink, as you mentioned, drink plenty of water. Like a simple way to do it is just, you could do those calculations as you mentioned, but just look at the color of your urine. If it's constantly yellow, that means you're concentrated, but you want to get to the point where you're drinking enough so that it clears up and you will go regularly. You don't want to drink a lot before going to bed, right? Try not to drink like 3 hours before you sleep, because then you will wake up in the middle of the night and it will interfere with sleep. And I think, part of this also is just exposure, right? There's plastics, there's chemicals like BPA, pesticides, heavy metals, all that stuff's in our environment. So you want to decrease your exposure because your body can eliminate those things. It is possible to eliminate them. It's difficult. And you can imagine if you have all these heavy metals and pesticides in your body, and then you're eating a crappy diet, which has chemicals that you're trying to eliminate, it overwhelms your elimination system, and all these things build up and have consequences. So, I really support regenerative farm foods, even organic if you can't do that. Try not using pesticides and chemicals when you can avoid it, and just be as natural as you can. Not heating in plastic containers or using plastic containers. Exactly. So these are ways that you can support your own detoxification system and your metabolism to help you heal.
To add to that, there's in terms of the products, there's actually tools out there available for us. So for example, the Environmental Working Group has a database of products. And so when I was diagnosed, it changed everything: shampoo, makeup, everything. And the great thing is there's so much awareness now that there are things out there for us. There are alternatives for everything, and not crappy ones, really high quality, good products.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great point. I love the environmental working group page. There's so much information there. You can actually look at maps where there's heavy amounts of pesticides in certain areas. And, you can look at where to live in the US based on like your toxin exposure. So there's a ton of information, a very interesting website to check out. And they have a dirty dozen list. So there's certain foods that you should really try to buy organic because otherwise there's tons of pesticides in there. So it's a good list to check out. Okay, so moving on to exercise. You mentioned yoga. So what do you do for exercise?
So that's my primary way in which I exercise. So it's heated vinyasa. So vinyasa, for many people that don't know, it just means flow. It's the movement from one posture to another, but it's done in a cyclical fashion that's so fast that it builds up your cardio rate, your heart rate. So it is what is conventionally known as power yoga, which is what I do, but I am consistent. I do it every day. Even if I don't feel good, I do it and take it a bit easy or even rest. I think just showing up is great, but I love it because I think it builds a lot of strength for me and it continues to have my heart rate up and then it provides for stability. So that personally for me has resonated with me. And then I really have a mind-body connection to nature. So I spend a lot of time outside if I can, not on a regular basis, but I try to hike around and, spend time in nature and then of course walks. And so, yeah, there are different opportunities that present itself. So for example, I was just on holidays in Guatemala and I was kayaking on the lake. I try to stay active whenever I can, aside from the yoga. So that's what I do for exercise. But it serves me so well because I have metastasis on my spine and I'm so committed to not taking narcotics and opiates. And that is often the default and what will be given instead of these types of alternatives and those types of drugs. And I think there is a time and a place where it should be used in acute settings where you are in severe pain, but chronically over time, they're difficult for our bodies and we risk a lot. We risk addiction and we risk things like, for me, I know when I've had to take it in the past, it's had implications on my GI system. So I want to avoid that. So that's why I do this, because I don't feel pain when I do it. And that's such a great, that's the incentive for me. That's why I'm on my mat every day. So I feel fit. And one of the things that I was sharing with Ravi is that I've never felt stronger. So right now I'm actually, because of the studio has been so encouraging, I'm actually in training to become an instructor. Because I will do it on my spare time. And, but right now I'm in training and I'm going to audition at the end of the month and to be a certified yoga teacher. And I'm so excited about that. So,
like you're not doing enough things, Kim. You're adding a yoga instructor to your list of.
Let's see.
Well, that's awesome. Yoga is such a great exercise because, as you mentioned, you can get the cardiovascular benefit. You can help stretch and elongate your muscles, improve your flexibility. It's an awesome exercise. And I think very importantly, going outside as much as possible is great because just being outdoors in and of itself is stress relieving, but also the sunlight exposure helps. And it's not even direct, even if it's not direct sunlight exposure, you still get that infrared light. And in fact, there's some literature that's suggesting that infrared light in and of itself stimulates your mitochondria and produces melatonin in your mitochondria, which is a potent antioxidant. So, that actually also helps as well, helps you feel better and has that antioxidant activity. So there's a lot of reasons to be outside. So, recommendations is to exercise in whatever way you feel like you can. Going for walks, going to the gym if you want to do that, because it improves your mood, it decreases risk of disease, decreases your pain. There's something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which it increases. It's kind of like the feel-good hormone. So there's so many benefits. Okay, let's move to sleep now. And sleep is, as we all know, super important. So what kind of practices do you do around sleep?
So admittedly, I sleep well, but through routine. I have to be consistent, which I think, and what I've read about is that we should all have habits like we have for our children. We sleep around the same time, we wake up around the same time. Otherwise, our body gets a little bit confused. And so I think that creates like the sort of the best rest. So for me, ideally, I like to sleep around 10:30, 11. I like to wake up around 7, 7:30. And I'm able to rest well. When I'm not in my own setting, it's a little bit disruptive for me, and I get a little bit out of sorts. But yeah, the naturopath recommended to sleep a little bit cooler in a cooler setting, so around like somewhere between 68 to 70. I don't know what other recommendations. Try to unplug a bit before.
Absolutely.
I am a little bit. This is like my weak spot. Not on my phone, but I often end up watching something right before I go to bed. But I want to come towards just a little bit of letting go of that and just having a bit more silence. But I think that is supposed to be good for us and kind of coming down, like allowing our body to come down.
Right.
Um,
I remember, Kim, when we both were at a mutual friend's wedding in Miami, and Kim had she had a roommate at the time, and she just came down frazzled and was like, I can't sleep. She is like, I don't know which was she snoring or she was doing something. You could not sleep with her in the room. So I think you kicked her out.
Yes, melatonin is very helpful. I've never taken melatonin since cancer diagnosis, but it's a natural way to help you calm down.
Yes.
Yeah.
So some recommendations I'll just stack on that. Sleep hygiene, super important. And I would say start with sleep hygiene before you look at medications, because commonly people are just like, I can't sleep, give me some drugs. And that really shouldn't be it. You should look at the root cause. So some things that think about: expose yourself to sunlight in the morning, specifically, like right when the sun rises, try to look at the light. That in and of itself will help sleep because it suppresses melatonin. It entrains you into your circadian rhythm. And you want to avoid blue light the last 2 hours at night. So that blue light will actually, again, suppress your melatonin. You need a higher level of melatonin to sleep well. So try to avoid that. If you like Kim, you watch a little something. I do the same thing. It's hard not to. My phone's right there. I shouldn't keep it next to me, but I do. And I'm like, let me watch this YouTube, little segment or whatever. So if you want to do that, wear blue blocking glasses. That's something that will help. Other thing to consider is exercise. Well, definitely exercise, as we discussed, because that helps with sleep. Don't eat 2 hours before you sleep, and eating a whole foods healthy diet is important. And also consider some practices at night, like bathing before you sleep. That can calm you down. Like things that help you calm, deep breaths, journaling, those types of things really calm you down. So you're not, especially journaling, if your mind's racing, write down the things that you want to take care of for the next day. And that way it's out of your mind and you're not racing and thinking about those things as you're sleeping. Sleeping in a dark room is also important. So get those curtains to keep the light out. And then the temperature, as you mentioned, Kim, you want to keep the temperature like right around 68 degrees. Low, your body naturally drops in temperature as you sleep. And if you have a bunch of covers on, and you're sweating, a lot of times people notice they sweat and wake up and like, God, I'm hot. And that if you stay cool, it'll prevent that from happening. Awesome. So we went through a ton of information. I know that we could probably go on and on for another several hours, if not more, but it was just a tidbit and an understanding of, the things you can do, you can take control of if you have this diagnosis, or really literally, if you just want to prevent cancer or just live a healthier life. Do you have, Kim, what are some parting thoughts you have? Any resources to share?
Well, the parting thoughts I have about how empowering this, and then this is what we've been talking about this entire hour, but cancer is out of our control. It is. There's not, I try to do as much as I could possibly do, but I think I've come into a place of accepting and letting go, and I don't fight with it. I live with it, and it's okay. But that doesn't mean that I've given up. I do everything in my power to stay well, and all of these things allow for that. They allow it for us to stay well. So when you started out, your first question to me was around hopefulness, helplessness and hopefulness. And so I think this will create those sort of hopeful strategies that you are in it. It's not out of your control. And there are certain things that you can do for yourself. I outline some things that I do for myself, but you can find out what is right and best for you. So yeah, and there are many, many resources out there. I will encourage you to focus on resources that are evidence-based. There's a lot out there, and a lot of people say a lot of things and a lot of promises. And I want to kind of say that none of these things are going to, cure cancer, but they will help you become whole and help you address it. And, who knows, maybe you'll come into a place of no evidence of active disease or full remission or whatever, but focus on things that are backed by experts and that have data to support it, because there is a lot of misinformation out there because people are struggling and they do want that hope. So these are some of my parting thoughts.
Excellent. And there's a book that you told me about, which I have here.
Yes. I don't want to endorse, but I get nothing out of this, but this is what guides my practice. It's called Life Over Cancer with Keith Block. And this is the integrative oncologist that I saw, and I love it. It's very backed by research, and then offers strategies, practical things that we can do for ourselves along the line of this conversation. So
yes, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Kim. This was amazing. I'm so happy to have you, and I'm sure we'll get you back at some point and we can delve into some of these topics in more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. It was a pleasure. And I'm so glad that you're working on these issues and working with so many people that are also facing these similar types of things. So.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And if you did, please make sure to hit the subscribe and the like button and leave a comment about what you'd like to see on our future episodes. Just a reminder that this podcast is for educational purposes only. It does not substitute for professional care, nor does it constitute medical or other professional advice or services. If you're looking for medical care, please seek a qualified doctor or medical professional. For more information, or if you'd like to check out our programs, please visit our website, peakwellnesshealth.com. That's peakwellnesshealth.com.